They conquer the gridiron and earn fortunes. But for some, the victory is tragically short-lived. Life after football spiraled into financial ruin and drove one star to the edge of committing murder. Consider Vince Young, who torched a $35 million fortune on shopping binges, private jet flights, and disastrously shady deals. Or Clinton Portis, who lost over $10 million by putting his faith in the wrong people. These are the stunning stories of NFL players whose empires collapsed almost in the blink of an eye. First, Vince Young. Vince Young was once hailed as one of the most electrifying quarterbacks the NFL had ever seen. A national champion at Texas, a premier draft pick, and the anointed future of the Tennessee Titans. Yet just a handful of years later, the man who earned over $35 million was utterly destitute, and his downfall was every bit as dramatic as his legendary career. Young had a catastrophic spending addiction. He reportedly incinerated $5,000 a week at the Cheesecake Factory, once vaporized $15,000 on a single dinner, and even purchased every last seat on a Southwest Airlines flight simply because he demanded privacy. When it came to his wealth, Vince Young behaved as if the well would never run dry, but the truly fatal damage was inflicted by the people he trusted most. He surrendered control of his finances to an advisor and his own uncle, whom he had also appointed as his manager. That trust culminated in absolute disaster. After being forced into bankruptcy, Young discovered a trail of forged signatures. He found mystifying investments and business deals he had never authorized, including one payment of $600,000 to a corporation whose existence was a complete mystery to him. By 2014, Young was compelled to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The filings listed his debts as high as $10 million. It was a staggering collapse for a man once destined to be the NFL's next iconic superstar. Following his football career, he attempted to rebuild his life, collaborating with the University of Texas, taking on broadcasting work, and opening the Vince Young Steakhouse. Coming up, we have the story of an NFL player whose wealth disintegrated seemingly overnight, Clinton Portis. He was one of the league's most sensational running backs, a decorated star for the Broncos and Redskins who accumulated over $40 million in his career. But after years of ruinous investments, extravagant spending, and being systematically fleeced by crooked financial advisors, he was left with almost nothing. At his zenith, Portis was an unstoppable force, a record-demolishing athlete with the mansions, cars, and cash to prove it. But behind the curtain, his money was hemorrhaging at an alarming rate. He placed his faith in two financial advisors and friends, Janesh Brambot and Jeff Rubin, who convinced him to pour millions into corrupt ventures. These schemes included a fraudulent casino investment and a classic Ponzi-style operation. By the time Portis uncovered the betrayal, over $10 million had vanished, stolen from him. The theft was executed through forged signatures and a cascade of unauthorized withdrawals. His own reckless spending only fueled the fire. He purchased numerous homes, threw legendary parties, handed out credit cards to friends like candy, and paid the bills for total strangers. When his financial world finally imploded, he owed money to the IRS, to casinos, to 4 women for domestic support, and even to his own mother, a debt of nearly $500,000. That particular debt was incurred because one of his advisors secretly secured a loan against her house without his knowledge. At his lowest point, Portis admitted his rage was so intense he actively considered murdering the men who had robbed him. The only thing that held him back was the thought of his 4 sons. In 2015, he finally declared bankruptcy, reporting just $150 remaining in his bank account. Today, Portis works as a coach and a mentor, candidly sharing his cautionary tale. In a different vein, our next NFL player was so buried in debt that his financial ruin was immediate. Bernie Kosar. Bernie Kosar was celebrated as one of the most brilliant quarterbacks of his time, a local hero who led the Miami Hurricanes to a national championship and transformed the Cleveland Browns into serious contenders. But years after his retirement, the very man who could read defenses with genius-level clarity failed to read the fine print on his own finances. By 2009, Kosar was millions in debt and had no choice but to file for bankruptcy. Court documents revealed a horrifying financial reality. He held between $1 million and $10 million in assets, but was crushed by over $50 million in liabilities. He owed $3 million to his former wife. Another $1.5 million was owed to the Cleveland Browns, and an additional $9 million was entangled in disastrous real estate investments. His restaurant chain had already collapsed. His marriage had disintegrated, and creditors were closing in from all sides to collect what they were owed. He initially filed for a Chapter 11 reorganization, desperately hoping to salvage his finances, but his situation was far beyond repair. His case was later converted to a Chapter 7 liquidation, meaning his assets were auctioned off simply to pay a fraction of his debts. And while his financial life was completely unraveling, his body was giving out on him. The years of brutal hits had left their mark. He was suffering from fused spinal discs, broken fingers, 2 shattered wrists, and a hip that was in desperate need of replacement. In one gut-wrenching interview, Kosar limped barefoot through his own mansion, coughing, his teeth in a plastic cup, a walking testament to the devastating toll the game had taken on him. Moving forward, we have the story of an NFL player who fell into debt and was sent to jail. But the chapter that followed shocked the entire world. Michael Vick. Michael Vick was engineered to be a generational talent, the first overall pick in the draft, the fastest quarterback alive, and one of the highest paid players in the annals of the NFL. But his story was about to take one of the most notorious turns the league had ever witnessed. In 2007, Vick's massive $130 million contract with the Atlanta Falcons vanished in an instant when authorities exposed his key role in an illegal and barbaric dogfighting ring. He pleaded guilty, served 21 months in a federal penitentiary, and forfeited everything: his salary, his endorsements, and his reputation. While serving his time, Vick filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, reporting $17.6 million in debt. His fortune was gone. Some had been stolen by unscrupulous advisors, some was wasted on ill-fated investments, and much of it was tied up in lawsuits from business deals gone wrong. By the time he was released, his entire empire was gone. But instead of disappearing from the public eye, Vick accomplished something no one thought possible. He returned to work, signing a contract with the Philadelphia Eagles in 2009. He clawed his way back into the league's elite, earning nearly $57 million over the next 5 years. He lived on a brutally strict budget and directed nearly all of his earnings toward repaying every penny he owed. By 2017, Vick had paid back $17.4 million, which accounted for 99% of his total debt. Even his own bankruptcy trustee called it a remarkable achievement, something that occurs in maybe 1 out of 100 cases. Vick later said, "I didn't want to stiff people who never stiffed me." Next up, we have an NFL player who went bankrupt in large part because of women, but also as a result of other failed business ventures. Warren Sapp. Warren Sapp's 13-season NFL career was legendary. He amassed an estimated $40 million, captured a Super Bowl title, earned 7 Pro Bowl nods, and was honored with an induction into the Hall of Fame in 2013. Yet, by April of 2012, this celebrated athlete was forced to file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, revealing a staggering $6.7 million in liabilities stemming from a disastrous mix of divorce settlements, overdue child support, collapsed real estate ventures, and his own profligate spending. The bankruptcy compelled the sale of $645,000 in personal assets, a collection that painfully included 240 pairs of prized Jordan shoes valued at $6,000, a $2,250 watch, a lion skin rug, and a large nude painting. In a devastating blow, even his cherished Super Bowl and Miami championship rings were surrendered. Before his financial collapse, Sapp was pulling in $45,000 a month as an analyst for the NFL Network, but that income was quickly seized by creditors, and the network issued a public reprimand once his filing hit the news. His extravagant lifestyle and larger-than-life public image only compounded his problems. With creditors closing in from all sides, Sapp was left to navigate the wreckage. Despite the severity of his financial implosion, he managed to stay clear of any criminal charges. The damage was exclusively monetary. Today, Sapp is rebuilding, earning $150,000 a year as a graduate assistant coach for the Colorado Buffaloes, where he guides young athletes. In stark contrast, the next NFL star's downfall was triggered by a single, catastrophic business investment. Mark Brunell. For 19 seasons in the NFL, Mark Brunell was a formidable quarterback, predominantly with the Jacksonville Jaguars, accumulating career earnings that surpassed $50 million. But his remarkable on-field achievements, which included 3 Pro Bowl selections, leading Jacksonville on 4 separate playoff journeys, and securing a Super Bowl championship as a backup to Drew Brees, were not enough to prevent financial ruin caused by a cascade of ill-fated investments and terrible financial choices. In 2010, while still an active player for the New York Jets, Brunell declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy, reporting assets of only $5.5 million against an overwhelming $24.7 million of debt. This financial implosion was primarily fueled by real estate and business ventures that were decimated by the 2007 housing market crash. Through a company named Champion LLC, Brunell and former teammates Joel Smeg and Todd Forum had sunk $11 million into a luxury condominium development that went belly up when the property bubble burst. He was also devastated by a $9 million loss from 12 Whataburger franchises in the Jacksonville region, in addition to several other smaller real estate failures. His troubles were made worse by personal loan guarantees and excessive spending. The bankruptcy declaration set off a wave of lawsuits from his creditors and led to the forced $9.5 million sale of his mansion in Florida. As former NFL Commissioner Michael Hoyu noted, Brunell's financial demise was partially a result of being overly trusting and engaging in extremely high-risk investment strategies. Now we turn to an NFL player who lost it all, pursuing a business venture he was deeply passionate about, Deuce McAllister. Deuce McAllister was a powerhouse running back for the New Orleans Saints, earning $70 million over an 8-season NFL career that featured 2 Pro Bowl appearances. Despite his triumphs on the gridiron, such as a career-best 1,741 rushing yards in 2003 and steering the Saints to numerous playoff appearances, McAllister's fortune evaporated because of one failed business. By 2009, McAllister's Nissan dealership located in Jackson, Mississippi, was forced into Chapter 11 bankruptcy after it defaulted on its loans. His debt to Nissan alone was reportedly over $6.6 million, plus an additional $300,000 in interest. The dealership's failure unleashed a torrent of lawsuits from lenders, cost him his home in Luling, Louisiana, and saw his personal net worth plummet from millions to a mere $50,000. This financial catastrophe came on the heels of a string of injuries that had already crippled his earning potential in the NFL. Back in 2005, McAllister had inked an 8-year, $50.1 million contract with the Saints, which included $12.5 million in signing and option bonuses. But just 5 games into that massive deal, he suffered a torn right ACL. He made a comeback the next year with 1,057 yards, only to tear his left ACL in 2007. The Saints released him in 2009 as a cost-cutting measure, and his career ended soon after. McAllister's bankruptcy wasn't solely the result of the car dealership's collapse. It was also driven by his own lavish spending and poorly managed investments. Since leaving the NFL, McAllister has found work as a color commentator for Saints, radio, an analyst for college football, and an athletic consultant at Street Martin's Episcopal School. Coming up is the story of an NFL player whose compulsive spending habits were the direct cause of his financial ruin. Andre Rison. During his NFL tenure, Andre Rison raked in more than $20 million, made 5 Pro Bowls, won a Super Bowl ring, and built a legacy as one of the most flamboyant wide receivers in the game. But it all vanished within just a few years. Rison burned through cash as if his NFL paydays would never cease. His acquisitions included 8 Ferraris and 34 Mercedes Benzes, alongside 14 BMWs, and he spent over $1 million on jewelry alone. He maintained a 40-person entourage for his parties and would squander tens of thousands in a single night at clubs. In 1994, his $2 million mansion was engulfed in flames after his girlfriend at the time, Lisa Left Eye Lopes, torched it during a heated argument. This chaotic event did nothing to curb his habits. He continued his reckless spending, loaning huge sums to friends, and keeping his inner circle vast. The party finally ended in 2007. Crushed under the weight of enormous debt and unpaid child support, Rison filed for bankruptcy. He bluntly acknowledged his weakness, stating that while some athletes struggle with gambling, his problem was an insatiable addiction to spending. He recounted nights where he would return from the clubs and simply collapse, leaving $10,000 in cash scattered on the floor. At the height of his excess, Rison's personal car collection was larger than the inventory of most dealerships. As he himself put it, when you have cash, you create debt. Conversely, the next NFL player's financial ruin was a direct result of the 2008 financial crisis, and the story behind it is astonishing. Dermontti Dawson. Dermontti Dawson is widely regarded as one of the most dominant centers to ever play in the NFL. He was a 7-time Pro Bowler, a 3-time AFC Lineman of the Year, and the unwavering anchor of the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line for 13 seasons. Upon his retirement in 2001, Dawson pivoted his career toward real estate. He became involved in multiple business ventures, focusing on the development of housing projects and commercial shopping centers throughout Kentucky. For a time, it seemed like a brilliant second act. However, when the financial crisis of 2008 struck, his entire world came crashing down. Real estate values plummeted, loans went into default, and Dawson's investments, which were mostly minority shares and partnerships, left him exposed to massive personal guarantees with absolutely no control over the outcomes. By 2010, the Hall of Famer who once earned $4.2 million a year was submerged in nearly $70 million of debt. He filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, with his listed assets totaling just $1.44 million. This meager inventory included a Rolex watch, a golf cart, a baby grand piano, and even a $10 stake in his daughter's mixed-breed dog. All the while, Fifth Third Bank and various Kentucky development firms were aggressively pursuing him for millions of dollars in defaulted loans and legal judgments. He ultimately left Kentucky behind, relocating to San Diego to rebuild his life and start anew as a sales executive. Next up, we explore the case of an NFL player whose financial downfall was directly linked to having 9 children with 9 different women. Drained his bank accounts, leaving him penniless. This is the story of Travis Henry, a man who once had it all. He commanded NFL stardom, possessed a fortune in the millions, and carved out a brilliant career as a Pro Bowl running back. Yet, beyond the stadium lights, his personal life was a portrait of chaos. Before he even turned 30, Henry had fathered 9 children with 9 different mothers, saddling him with a staggering annual child support bill of $170,000. The moment his income stream dried up, a torrent of lawsuits began to pour in. While Henry pleaded poverty and offered justifications for missing payments, the courts remained unconvinced. A shortfall of just $16,600 was all it took to land him behind bars. Not even his massive $25 million deal with the Denver Broncos could shield him. In the end, he pocketed a mere $6.7 million before his off-field turmoil and persistent injuries got him released. Then came the drug charges, a cruel twist of fate. The very man who had casually dismissed the league's warnings to rookies about poor choices had become the living embodiment of that cautionary tale. Henry himself acknowledged a pattern of disastrous errors, naively trusting partners who claimed to be using contraception, burning through cash on extravagant jewelry and vehicles, and willfully disregarding every single red flag. "I was behaving like someone who'd never possessed anything," he confessed. The consequences were severe. Destitute, unemployed, and besieged by legal orders from 9 separate courts, Travis Henry's kingdom had crumbled to dust. Next, we examine an NFL titan whose financial collapse was so complete he was forced to return to his childhood bedroom. Chris Mallister, who at his peak was one of the league's most feared quarterbacks, his credentials were unimpeachable. A first-round draft pick, a 3-time Pro Bowl selection, and a Super Bowl champion. In 2004, the Baltimore Ravens awarded him a colossal 7-year, $55 million contract, which included a $10 million signing bonus and an additional $7.5 million roster bonus. He was swimming in wealth, celebrity, and raw ability. Yet, in a shockingly short span, this very same superstar was destitute, jobless, and residing under his parents' roof. By 2011, Mallister's situation was laid bare in court documents, where he confessed to having 0 income and no savings, relying on his parents for basic necessities. His direct statement to the court was stark. "I have been unemployed since 2009. I reside in my parents' house. My parents cover my fundamental living costs." This confession was part of his attempt to reduce the $11,000 monthly child support he owed his ex-wife, Marlene, the very woman who had previously alleged he threw her out of their home for refusing to terminate a pregnancy. Accounts suggest his vast fortune was squandered on relentless partying, reckless spending, and disastrous investments. His desperation reached a point where he had to sell his cherished Super Bowl rings just to survive. Now let's examine a different path to financial ruin, one paved with catastrophic investment choices that shattered a player's life. Luther Ellis, a man who was once the very soul of the Detroit Lions defense. He was a 2-time Pro Bowler, a first-round draft pick, and, more importantly, one of the most admired figures in the league, both for his performance and his character. In the span between 2000 and 2004, his earnings exceeded $11.6 million. He lived in a $1 million residence, drove luxury automobiles, and possessed a name that commanded respect throughout Detroit. Yet, just a few short years later, Ellis found himself bankrupt, having lost both of his properties and depending on the charity of church donations, and the generosity of friends simply to put food on the table for his family. This precipitous fall from grace began after he left the game, when Ellis funneled his entire fortune into a series of doomed business ventures, including speculative real estate, a manufacturing firm named Trinity Armor, and various internet startups. He deliberately disregarded the counsel of financial experts, pursuing high-risk investments with the misguided intention of earning more in order to be more charitable. Instead, he lost almost everything. By 2009, the situation was so dire that Ellis and his wife were forced to file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Their filing painted a grim picture, with just $1.8 million in assets against a staggering $4.4 million in debt. On top of that, they owed more than $37,000 in taxes, thousands more in tuition and credit card bills, and had just lost their Utah home to foreclosure. A crippling $524,000 civil judgment from that foreclosure was the knockout punch. Meanwhile, their $1.6 million Michigan home was also submerged in debt, its value having plummeted to a mere $800,000 in a collapsing market. The very same man who once graciously signed autographs for adoring fans was now humbly requesting food assistance from local churches. "They have really stepped up in a major way to assist us," Ellis acknowledged, humbled by the community's response, while openly conceding his own failings of greed, arrogance, and profoundly poor judgment. "This wasn't a story of gambling, narcotics, or womanizing," he clarified. "The downfall was me, believing I was more intelligent than everybody around me." Facing the immense responsibility of providing for 11 children, 6 of whom were adopted, Ellis was left with no alternative but to rebuild his life from scratch. This time, he was armed with a harsh lesson that most athletes only comprehend when it's far too late. The NFL money never lasts forever. Our final account is of a legendary NFL figure whose immense trust in his business partners ultimately paved his path to financial ruin. Sound of announcer, Unitas keeps his touchdown record going as he hits Raymond Berry in the end zone. This was a man who set legendary records and to Fife, including an incredible streak of consecutive games with a touchdown pass. Johnny Unitas was far more than a quarterback. He was the very icon of American football. Known as Johnny U, the Golden Arm, he single-handedly revolutionized the sport. A 3-time MVP, a 4-time champion, this was the architect who helped construct the NFL into the powerhouse it is today. Yet, once the roar of the crowd faded, the very legend who had forged an empire on the gridiron watched it all disintegrate away from the game. After hanging up his cleats, Unitas plunged himself into the world of business, and it was there his tragic decline began. In 1984, he joined 2 partners in securing a $3.5 million loan to acquire an electronics manufacturing company known as National Circuits Incorporated. What was meant to be a post-career triumph quickly devolved into a catastrophic failure. The company imploded, debt mounted, and because Unitas had personally guaranteed the loan, the entire burden fell on his shoulders. By 1991, the celebrated Hall of Famer was bankrupt. Creditors moved swiftly, placing liens against his residence, freezing both his checking and savings accounts, and seizing every asset within their reach. The financial empire he had meticulously built over 18 seasons had vanished. And tragically, this was not an isolated incident. Prior to the National Circuits disaster, Unitas had already sunk capital into a string of failures. Bowling alleys, a prime rib restaurant that closed almost immediately, a freight business, and real estate deals that all went under. At the height of his career, Unitas was earning as much as $250,000 annually, an astronomical sum for that era. But his past earnings meant nothing when the bill collectors arrived. In a final, somber twist, by the time of his death in 2002, a significant portion of his outstanding debt had been settled by the taxpayers of Maryland. Here we have the story of an NFL player who built an empire only to see it all crumble through failed real estate deals. His name is Charlie Batch. Charlie Batch, the reliable backup quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, found himself in a financial nightmare despite a 15-season NFL career and 2 super process. bowl championships. In December of 2010, Batch was forced to declare Chapter 7 bankruptcy, revealing $8.3 million in liabilities against just $2.3 million in assets, a catastrophe rooted in the collapse of his real estate company, Batch Development Co-Est Incorporated. His ambitious property ventures imploded, highlighted by a default on a $1.15 million mortgage that resulted in 25 properties being handed over to a receiver. Yet, in the face of this staggering debt, Batch successfully shielded his most treasured personal belongings. His Super Bowl rings, his personal residence, and his priceless memorabilia were all protected from seizure following the bankruptcy. Proceedings in June of 2011, thanks to crucial agreements with creditors like the Prime Iraq Real Estate Fund, which held a claim of $800,000. A dedicated legal team fought tirelessly to guarantee that these irreplaceable symbols of his career would not be liquidated. But make no mistake, Batch's financial downfall was not the result of reckless personal spending. He was pouring his fortune back into his community, specifically Homestead, Pennsylvania, by revitalizing buildings, funding youth basketball programs, and championing local schools. Those closest to him, friends and legal advisors, described a man who was intelligent, down-to-earth, and incredibly responsible, a complete departure from the typical narrative of athletes squandering their wealth. Following the bankruptcy, Batch reinvented himself, carving out a new career as a pregame analyst for the Steelers, a color commentator during preseason broadcasts, and a co-host for the official Steeler postgame show. His experience serves as a sobering lesson even the most astute and civic-minded athletes can be brought to the brink of financial devastation when major investments go south. However, it also shows that strategic planning and formidable legal defense can safeguard what is truly invaluable. Share your perspective in the comments below. And before you go, be sure to like this video and subscribe to NFL Rivals to catch our next story.